Good evening, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Talking Point. My name is Fahraaz Patel. We say Jazakallah to you, the viewer, for staying with us here on Hilaal TV, TSTV channel 347. Witness to Power, a political memoir by Dr. Mathews Phosa, of course. You would know him as the former ANC Treasurer General and, of course, veteran of the party. And he's written an extensive book where he talks about his life from, of course, being born in the Mbombela province to becoming an underground fighter for controversies where in Mozambique when he was in exile to, of course, being part of the negotiating team in CODESA. He talks about, the Polokwane conference, the infamous Polokwane conference, when, of course, he was elected as the Treasurer General, to, of course, discussing the current day politics of the government of national unity. And prior to that, of course, the corruption and the decay which has occurred in the country. And today, he is my guest. Dr. Phosa, thank you so much for joining us. Absolute pleasure to have you on.
My brother, salam alaikum to you and to our viewers out there.
No, alaikum salam. It's an absolute pleasure. I read this book, Dr. Phosa, blown away because it took me back to, my childhood days. Of course, in the early 90s, I have vague memories, of course, of CODESA, but I do remember the 1994 elections. I remember everything that went on post that, the political rumblings that were occurring in the country. I mean, you are a classic example of the famous phrase, been there, worn the T-shirt, everything else.
Yeah, the reason why I wrote the book was and is to inform those who were not born in 94 about what happened in this country. And those who were born after 94, about the evolution of that period, the 1030 not knowing exactly what happened behind closed doors. Now, this book is a handy book to share information in the most frank and honest manner about what happened. I was a witness to power behind 5 presidents in this country, and the book deals with that. And for me, it was a pleasure to share not only the 1994, but even before, before I came back from exile. I was a commander of our army in Mozambique, at the borders, not worrying about negotiations, but focusing on prosecuting the struggle against apartheid with arms in hand. And they called me, Oliver Tambo called me and said, come here, young man, forget the guns and everything. Come and be part of the teams that historically will start the negotiations. I was honored because I then met Mandela in Lusaka at that time. He said, boy, you're coming along with me. I said, what do you mean? He said, you will be joining me soon. And I did join him as part of this team.
Dr. Phosa, I want to talk of liberation movements. Africa has seen so many of them, from Frelimo to ZANU-PF to, of course, the African National Congress. When the negotiation happened, and of course, I'm looking at the names of Barnard and obviously, Nelson Mandela, the late great Nelson Mandela, sitting with F.W. de Klerk. How was, and I want to touch on CODESA especially, how was it, how did you change your mindset from the comrade Phosa, Mathews Phosa, who had a gun in his hand and said, I'm taking on the oppressors, to say, now it's time for me to put on my suit and negotiate? How was that turnaround? Because it's difficult for maybe the ordinary citizen to fathom that complete 180 from being a soldier on the ground to now sitting in a room negotiating with the very same oppressor.
If you follow the history of the ANC, negotiations was never ruled out as a terrain of struggle. In 1912, they pleaded to negotiate with the powers that those days, but were rejected. But Mandela was sent to jail because that government rejected negotiations as a terrain of struggle. Then they forced us to resort to armed struggle, which we did. And of course, when the moment for negotiation came, we were not going to turn our backs against it. We said, we're not bloodthirsty. We want to make peace for our country, usher in democracy for our country. So we embraced that. I flew in here alone. If you want to know the story. And Thabo Mbeki had briefed me on a number of things. So when you arrive at home, stop the hanging. There's no way we're going to talk to these guys while they're hanging your comrades for their beliefs. I arrived at John Smart's former, and I'm met by people I don't know. They whisked me behind the airport there into a place where Zuma and Maduna were kept. And along the way, they say, we're going to Flag Plus. But they had heard that had been questioning some of their defected soldiers who were killing people in the country coming from Flag Plus. I said, you win, sir. You win. They said, no, Mr. Phosa, we're just joking. Sick joke about Flag Plus where people came who killed so many. But we decided it's a moment for peace. And where this leader called Mandela, who said, guys, let's seize the moment and make peace. He always said, let us impose peace on violence. People were bitter. He says, rise above your bitterness. When we young soldiers would want to resort to violence when in retaliation, he would say, don't use your heart, use your brain. Don't give the enemy an excuse to continue to kill the people. Impose peace on violence. It's a noble thing. And we're told, peace, violence takes the worst out of us.
Sure.
And peace takes the best out of us. You know, these are values which I'll carry. No university could teach me what Mandela taught me. Nothing. And those are the things that made us to turn.
Yeah.
And of course, we had to educate the militants out there. You know.
And it brings me to Boipatong, because you mention it quite a lot in the book.
Yes.
How it hurts you deeply. You mention it. You say it brought about a pain that I think the last time you had felt such a pain was when Chris Hani was murdered, when Steve Biko was murdered also. It was two moments in the history of South Africa that really hurt you quite deeply as a person. How was Nelson Mandela at the time saying, you've got Boipatong, which is of course Afrikaner militants teaming up with Zulu citizens of the country at a time where it was so hostile and no one really knows where we're going, because you've got the Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi at the time. There's a sense of unpredictability that is occurring. You're close with Mandela. How does Nelson Mandela say this has to stop? Because I remember his famous saying, put down your guns, put down your pangas, let's go to the negotiating table.
Well, we just arrived in the country trying to do the preparations for the first talks about talks. Grootskir minute, the great Grootskir minute. And the Boipatong happened. People have been killed, massacred. I said to Maduna, no, these guys are not serious about talks. Let's fly back to Lusaka. We in fact flew back to Lusaka without telling Mandela. When he opened his eyes, we're gone. But we had lost faith in the process. When we arrived in Lusaka, Mandela had talked to the other guys to tell those boys to come back. We'll put on the next plane back to here. And we had to cool down and discipline ourselves and say, what do we do with the Mandela? Said, boys, there is Judge Goldstone. He's going to investigate this massacre.
Sure.
Let's leave the matter in the hand of the Judge Goldstone. Let's focus on the negotiations. The enemy is trying to divert us from peace to violence. Again, we said, okay, old man, we'll follow you. And we followed him into the talks.
Dr. Phosa, page 123, you write about the late great Nelson Mandela and his advice on leadership. I read this, and I don't want to go through all of them, but it's really something that is quite important, and it brings to the question of liberation movements today.
Yes.
ZANU-PF, we've seen Robert Mugabe, what had happened in Zimbabwe. A few weeks ago, it's the Frelimo party in Mozambique, and of course the ANC, as a fellow liberation movement party, has been in talks with them to try and quell what was happening in Mozambique. Do you feel that liberation movement in today's modern society still has a place? I ask this question because when I listen to citizens of the country, and we're going to touch on the ANC's decline within the voters' role, because the citizens say the ANC cannot speak to us in a modern day political environment. And this is where, for example, the Democratic Alliance or the MK Party or even the EFF have said we're gonna pounce on that because maybe the ANC has lost touch with what the citizen needs right now.
Last year I was addressing an audience at the University of Vutivi in Mozambique, Maputo. And I made a statement which reverberated here and in Mozambique. I said the ANC and Frelimo are losing the grassroots. They're losing the support of the people. And I said, I used a Portuguese word, cuidado ANC, cuidado Frelimo, which means pass up, be careful. What happened in our elections is not surprising for me. The people have lost confidence in the ANC. The romanticism of the liberation is gone. And it can only get worse unless the ANC does something dramatic and reverse corruption,
Sure.
the lack of service delivery, and deliver that better life which we promised. But that is becoming elusive. And the people are saying, they promise us a better life. There's load shedding, there's potholes. Where is the better life? You know? Some of them even go to say, but the party didn't have potholes. The party didn't have load shedding. They forget the pain of apartheid because they're contrasting the ANC with the wrong party and wrong system. But that's where we put ourselves. Frelimo is in a very serious crisis right now.
Yes.
They must come out of that situation intact. And I pray for Mozambique every day because it's not good. But the broad question you are raising, what is the future of liberation movement? If liberation movement do not pull their socks and think that they're entitled to power forever, they're fooling themselves. The people will judge them harshly and there will be new parties which take over.
One of the advices that President Mandela says, find an agenda, a dream, a cause that is bigger than you as an individual or even your own race, hatred, or trauma. Otherwise, in seeing you rise above your past and your ego, will your followers and will realize that you're fit to lead and ready and willing to make sacrifices for the bigger cause. It seems when you look at the electoral decline of the ANC, there's been too many, and we're going to touch on that in a bit, Dr. Phosa, that there's been too many individuals who have thought we are bigger than the party. And the citizens punished the ANC for that.
Quite justifiably. You know, we discussed this at a meeting at my brother Mahir Tayop. I think you were there.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah, he quoted the part of that, Mandela's values, thanks to him. And we tried to implement, to talk about the same thing around. Fact of the matter is, the romanticism of the liberation movement has worn out. It's gone. The ANC will have to deliver a better life and fight the evils within its ranks. If it doesn't, it will be out of power. And there will be, nature doesn't allow a vacuum. There will always be another party which will lead this country. Its name won't be the ANC, it will be another party.
Sure. After the break, I continue my conversation with Dr. Mathews Phosa. We're going back in time, 17 years ago, the 2007 Polokwane conference. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Talking Point. I'm in conversation with Dr. Mathews Phosa, former ANC Treasurer General and veteran of the party. Dr. Phosa, right, we have to go to Polokwane. I remember it. I was a first-year student studying politics at the University of Johannesburg, and I followed this conference so carefully because it gripped me.
The ding-dong.
Yeah, it gripped me because for the first time, the ANC is sitting in a situation where there is really a split because previous conferences, I mean, there was no real fiery banter between the presidential candidates. Of course, it was straightforward contestation. I remember with Thabo Mbeki, obviously winning 1997 and, of course, 2002. But this one over here had something different, Dr. Phosa. So you go, of course, you're backing Jacob Zuma, and, of course, you, put your hand up for the Treasurer General position. But prior to that, of course, you've got the arms deal, you've got the Shabir Sheikh case, of course, Hilary Squires, the judge Hilary Squires was handing down the 2005 judgment. You always maintain, Dr. Phosa, that was the conference that changed the fate of the ANC. Talk to us about it, because it really was a conference that changed so much for the face of the African National Congress.
It didn't happen at the conference. The conference was a culmination point.
Sure.
Before the conference, some of the things you have mentioned happened. And of course, President Mbeki released Zuma as his deputy president from his position. That created a new tension in the ANC that, he was victimizing him. And we had the National General Council in Pretoria, where guys came for the first time wearing Zuma's T-shirt for the first time, which was offending some of the guys who said, but what is this? But they were showing a voice of protest through their clothes. And of course, there were a lot of push and pull in the NEC, in the build-up. And you could see, we're heading for trouble. These two bosses are going to split the movement. And they went headlong to the wall, taking each other on into the conference. The conference was split almost 50%. anyone could have won that conference. But the Zuma slate was more organized and it won the slate. But that was the death of the ANC, and we buried it in Polokwane. Ironical, Polokwane means a place where you bury. And that's why we buried the ANC.
And of course, it's the hometown of Peter Mokaba, who was the
that's why we buried the ANC.
Yeah.
And we came out of that place bleeding. And when we went back, Thabo Mbeki was no longer the president of the ANC, but he was the president of the country.
Sure.
And he was governing. But he should have attended the NEC meetings,
Yes.
the NWC meetings,
Yes.
officials meeting. He boycotted that because
And you have it all in the book.
yes,
mentioning it.
it became sulky and petulant. And of course, the guy said, but how is he governing the country? Whose mandate? He was like a lone ranger. And the debate in the NEC was, listen, get rid of him. Almost 95% unanimous. And the guys decided to get rid of him for good reason, politically speaking.
Yourself, among many others, of course, there were tensions between yourself and Thabo Mbeki and obviously the late Steve Tsoete. And you've got great admiration, because I've been watching interviews, and you still have great admiration for Steve Tsoete. When, of course, the whole debacle happened there in the early 2000s, do you feel that, given who Thabo Mbeki was, given the family name, the way he handled not just what was happening within the ANC, but the country as a whole, pre-Polokwane and post-Polokwane, left a bitter taste in many of the comrades of the comrades' mouths of the ANC?
Give Thabo credit. He's a smart strategist, a good economist, and he ran the country very well. Let me give him credit, full credit.
Oh, sure, of course. Yeah.
He did that, and they're creating jobs, growing the economy. The record is there. For me, there are two things which let him down, or he let himself down. He allowed 300,000 people to die because he was in denial of ARVs.
Yes.
And those people died. And then that was a big mistake. He must regret that and apologize to this nation for those deaths. Two, from nowhere, I'm sitting at home, Steve Tsoete announces that there's a plot to kill and overthrow Mbeki.
I remember that, yeah.
I mean, it's Cyril Ramaphosa, the current president, it's Tokyo Sogwale, it's myself being mentioned, being involved in a plot to kill and overthrow Mbeki. What? We had never been mad for 2 years to plot, and even now to kill a fly. Now here we're planning to kill a president. I said to myself, what is this? I mean, our children were being abused at school. So we must mention
that in the book, yeah.
Yeah, that your fathers are ambitious, they're power hungry, which was false. 12 months, for 12 months, Mbeki investigated that plot which never existed. At the end, Steve Tsoete was brave enough to say to me,
Yes,
Come Matthew,
I remember, yeah.
I'd like to go and let's go and apologize on TV. I said, Steve, I respect you. When you went on TV to accuse us, you were alone. Please return to TV and apologize, which he did.
Yes.
And later I was in China, he informs me, said, I want to come to your home to see your children and your wife and apologize to them.
Sure.
I said, fine, we must reconcile. We're colleagues. And then, of course, he got sick somehow along the way. I felt sorry for him. I went to see him and gave him flowers at the hospital. And Steve passed on. May his soul rest in peace. I respect a person who, when they have committed a wrong, they're able to say, I am sorry. I'm sorry is a very big word in our society.
You mention in the book also about admission of guilt, at least forgiveness, redemption.
Yes.
I don't know the relationship between you and Thabo Mbeki at this moment. Maybe you can shed light, because you're, of course, two former comrades. Would you and him be able to sit in a room and reconcile? Or have you done it already?
For me, Steve apologized for him too.
Yeah.
I thought it was embracive. I'm not petty that I would start nitpicking who spoke, who didn't speak. Thabo Mbeki were very close. I used to drive him home after the negotiation through the night, and we did so many things together. You see in the book, he's sitting with me on the lawn, smoking,
I've seen that.
smoking a pipe.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked him very much. Until the day he accused me of wanting to overthrow him, which was not true. And therefore, it created a lot of tension naturally. But since then, I was chairman of UNISA Council, University Council, the biggest university in Africa. I was the one with my council who formed the Thabo Mbeki Leadership Institute.
Yes.
We financed it. I was the one who invited me to Ethiopia to launch a UNISA campus in Ethiopia with the former President Meles. I pushed for the presidential library, the first presidential library and the only one until today. Was the Thabo Mbeki Presidential Library. If I hated him, why would I have done those things?
Sure.
I think I've shown acts of reconciliation beyond measure. It's up to him to decide. on good conscience, what does he do about the deep footprint of ill-treating others? It's up to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recalling September 2008, it was Ramadan time. I remember, and after our Ramadan prayers that we have in the evening, my late grandmother has SABC on, and she's watching because she also was involved in politics, and she tells me, Fahraaz, the president's about to talk. And I remember that night quite vividly. And you mentioned in your book that the recalling of a state president is something that the Constitution doesn't need, but it happened at that time. When you looked at it there, what was your take immediately of the Constitution, given that this is something that has happened, and you mentioned it? It was the second time when Jacob Zuma, of course, stepped down in 2018 as the president. And you said, this is something that may never die away, that this could happen again. It's not healthy, is it, for the Constitution, given that what we saw at Polokwane now has resonated amongst two presidents being recalled and having to go onto state television to actually announce the departure as the President of the Republic?
Let's take it step by step. I wrote the resolution for the NEC to dismiss Mbeki on the basis of the reasons they were giving to themselves. And I thought, this is what it culminates in. But then I realized in the resolution, I must provide for a constitutional framework of that resolution. It couldn't just be an NEC decision. It had to take into account this is the president of a country. 2, he's got a cabinet. 3, he's got a party to which he accounts. So all these, there were diplomatic missions which needed to be formed. So the resolution was drafted very carefully, and it was implemented very carefully with sensitivity. But still, there was an outrage within the ranks. That's how COPE was born.
Yes.
You know,
I remember,
the Terra Lukota formed COPE. Someone said to me this morning, why don't you mention Terra Lukota? I said, my book is not, it's about president, not Terra. Terra was never president. So he was the leader of a party. So, and I respect him. Then, fast forward, Mbeki announced he accepted. Give him credit. He was gracious. He accepted the resignation. He didn't resist. Then comes Zuma later, after not speaking to me for more than 5 years, because I said he must step down after the Constitutional Court decision. I said he must step down. I was the first leader of the ANC to say, step down. And I made enemies. For me, they're healthy enemies, because I had good reasons. I don't mind enemies as long as they're healthy. You know. Then he calls me. He says, come to the house. And I went to the house. It was late at night. I called one young man called Matsobani. We used to always move around with me and do politics with me, young Matsobani, Mutiba. And we go there. And I said, Matsobani, the president's coming, we must walk out. As he walks out, Zuma walks in. And I find that there's court papers. He's about to go to court the following day to challenge what will be a resolution the following day to remove him. I said, Mr. President, we are lawyers, and I won't mention their names. I will spare them for this. I'm misleading you.
Yes.
They're saying they're bringing an application for impeachment, against impeachment. But tomorrow there will be no attempt to impeach you. Impeachment must state you are bad, you stole, you do this. So what happened? It's 50+1. And the ANC alone can remove you. Right? So let's talk, let's forget about the legal issues. Let's try and shift to a press conference the following day and deal with the political issues. The political issues are that during the day your NEC took a decision to remove you. You have to respect it. You have to just abide by it like Mbeki abided by that decision and go. But then we had a long decision. He said, no, but Cyril betrayed me. He said, no, I must stay for 3 more months so that I could introduce him to the leadership of BRICS. A lot of nonsense. I mean, seriously, but that's what he believed in. And I said, but why don't you address the nation and talk about those things so we can vent? And of course, the next thing was in the morning. At 2 a.m. and it's Valentine's Day. And my God, we're sitting here, people are celebrating Valentine's Day, laugh, and you're discussing about hatred. And I said, Mr. President, I said to him something which I don't easily say to a man. I love you. And I hugged him. I said,
and you had a relationship. I mean, you spent how many years in Mozambique with him?
I said, I don't want you to be hurt or your children. You lose your pension, all this. I think we must handle this differently. Zuma is a diplomat, a smart one for that matter. He understood me. I left. In the morning, there was supposed to be that much awaited 10 o'clock. It didn't happen. I knew it wouldn't happen. But But I thought his lawyers would phone me and say, listen, the president told us we're wrong. No, they didn't phone either. I think they conceded. And then at the 2 o'clock or something, he went for a press conference. And he mentioned this, he vented. I thought at the end you say he's resigning. He didn't.
Yeah.
And I was tired because we had slept 3 a.m., 4 a.m.
Yes,
I slept, and the next thing,
Yeah.
I got a message from one of my friends who I'd briefed. He said, oh, at least he listened to you. I said, what did he listen to? Open TV. Oh, Zuma has resigned. Oh, hallelujah, this is very good. Let's move on now as a nation. And later we met somewhere else at his house, and we all thank one another.
Sure.
Yeah.
After the break, I have to stop you there, Dr. Phosa, because after the break, we're going to be chatting state capture, but Dr. Phosa's meeting with, of course, one of the Gupta brothers, and how this, of course, changed his perception of how the country would be run for the next few years. Do stay tuned. We'll have more for you after this break. Welcome back to Talking Point. I'm in conversation with Dr. Mathews Phosa. Dr. Phosa, I want to touch on this because it's going to lead to the discussion of the ANC renewal. Because one may, of course, there was a lot of events that preceded this. Of course, you've got the arms deal case. You've got, the Shabir Sheikh case, his association with former President Zuma. But I want to touch on the Guptas because, of course, when one mentions state capture, their name is there immediately. And, of course, they're not alone in this. You've got Posasa, and you've got other institutions that have played their part in the actual capturing of the country. Your meeting with Tony Rajesh Gupta, because there's, of course, this discussion of the millions that were given to the ANC, but under the pretext that it was given to, as they would quote, Ubaba. As a Treasurer General, it's, of course, the most difficult job because your job is to try and find money to fund the ANC, to keep the ANC going. And you've got these 3 individuals that are, of course, acting ahead of the country and thinking that they, quote unquote, doing a favor for the ANC. Talk to us about your meetings with him, because that would shape just your relationship with former President Zuma, who we've spent so many years. The 3 individuals could change the fate of the country and the party as a whole.
I didn't know Gupta from a bar of soap. After I was elected treasurer at Polokwane, Zuma called me to his forest house. Said, no, I would like to see you. I did not know why. And he said to me, please drive after me. So I drove after him. Then we reached this huge gate which opened.
Yes.
Like a castle.
Saxonwell. Yeah.
It was like going to a royal house.
Yeah.
And these city guys were sitting there. They were ready for us. I did not know who they were. I never met him before in my life. He introduced them to me nicely by name. And I said, well, I'm Mathews Phosa, I'm the new treasurer of the ANC. I'm looking for money. And they said, no. We will help you. And we can fly you, we can fly Baba. I said, but I don't want anything free. You know, Baba has just gone through Shabir Sheikh.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put him back there. I want to get him out of that. I mentioned that. And of course, I could feel the temperatures getting heated. 2 or 3, Zuma said, no, he's leaving me with them. I said to them, guys, give me 10 top Indian guys, Tata, Ambani, and others.
Yes.
Let's raise money for the ANC. No, they agree, all that happened. The rest is history. But when we were at the conference in Durban, it was African National Congress Conference, the Consultative Conference, I meet Tony at the hotel there, the Hilton. Tony, I need money. I'm the treasurer. He said, he laughs at me. So we're used to one another. He said, no, we're giving Baba 20 million rand.
Yes, that's the amount, yeah.
I said, what do you mean? He said, we gave him. I'm not going to give you again. So I retreated, I left him alone. But that's what he said. I can't say something which he did not say. But I didn't discuss it with Zuma. I was raising a lot of money, billions for the ANC. So I just thought good conscience would tell Zuma, if he's got the money, to bring it to me. I'm the treasurer.
Dr. Phosa, and that then sees the ripple effect of the institutions within the country. Of course, the SABC, where they start hosting through the New Age newspaper these business briefings. We start seeing, of course, the infiltration in the state-owned enterprises. And you've mentioned in your book how important these SOEs are in the public face of South Africa. For the man that you knew, which was President Zuma, were you shocked that 3 individuals could overpower him and really allow the state to be captured the way it was captured in such a helter-skelter way?
I was shocked. Later on, one of the Indian elders said to me, the ANC was naive. They didn't understand this octopus which was tying it like that. It turned out to be like that. And President Zuma was tired, could not breathe there. And a lot of ministers were crawling to the Gupta homes at a phone call to do their biddings. I had refused to do their biddings. And therefore there was tension between me and them. Like I said, I don't mind. I don't mind having enemies because I did nothing wrong. I refused to be corrupt or to be corrupted. They agreed to be corrupted. Whatever they gave Zuma, I don't know. But it looked funny. It looked like they had compromised him extensively. The way the new age was introduced to the top six of the ANC, it was like, listen, we're forming a newspaper, you must support it. And indeed, the state institutions supported those breakfasts, illegally in my view, unauthorized expenditures, supporting a private company. Those ministers, I don't want to mention their name, we know them, all of them. They were implicated, they were used like puppets to give mining rights, to do all sorts of things. That's how the octopus of corruption was tying the ANC with its president until the disaster happened.
And it brings me to the question of renewal, because every time there's a press conference, I hear the Secretary General Fikile Mbalula speaking about the ANC renewing itself. I remember it was a question that came up during the elections, the final day of the elections, when the results were announced, when the ANC suffered the shock defeat. And you've mentioned it extensively in the book that from 2016 local government elections, the signs were there. You had warned the ANC also at the same time. You said earlier on, pass up.
Yes.
It's coming to haunt you.
Yes.
The renewal, of course, and a lot of it has taken center stage when you look at the Zondo Commission report, the names that are implicated there, what has happened with state capture, and of course, starting from the arms deal, the reputational damage that the ANC has suffered. How does it renew itself? How does it go to the public, the very same public that look at the ANC and say, we can't trust you because we don't know what you're going to deliver? How does the ANC renew itself? Because it's going to be a massive struggle for them.
I predicted that we will lose Nelson Mandela, Ekurhuleni, and Tshwane at that time in Johannesburg. Sure. Because I was informed by the polls I was reading. And I'll come to that slowly but carefully. And when I made a statement that will happen, they threw stones at me. But it happened.
Sure.
In exactly the same way. And someone called me and said, what did you know about this? I said, but the poll spoke about it. And I said to him in a very sarcastic way, the clever blacks have spoken. But that's what the president said when he was being criticized. I said, that's their voice. They tell the president, we can speak with the clever blacks. You could lose these big cities. And when I came back from, I was in Dakar, Matthew, please help us to speak to Malema, to negotiate deals with us. Of course, it didn't work, but they didn't give Malema anything to take home. So Malema aligned with the DA in the municipalities. Very strange now, he doesn't even want to talk to them. But that's what happened at the time. Fast forward, the ANC says, we're at 40 now. We're going to renew ourselves. We acknowledge that the people have passed a vote of no confidence in us. It's one thing to talk about renewal and another to know what to do about renewing yourself. You have a whole lot of your Zondo Commission report which has not been effectively dealt with. A lot of cases like that. They must be dealt with. There must be law enforcement. People want to see crime being punished, right? You need to say to the people of South Africa, we will punish crime. And two, you need to say the cadres of the ANC from local government, provincial and national, will be carefully selected. There must be a machine that screens them. There must be proper political education which teaches people new moral values and putting the people first, not as a slogan, but in reality. Because we've got a slogan that says people first, but in reality, we put ourselves first. How can you explain the corruption that's taking place in municipality level? 240 billion disappeared. Where did it go to?
And the AG's report speaks of that.
Yes. I mean, and who's being arrested? Who's being... If you can find those people and be seen to be... Justice must be seen to be done. The people will have more confidence in us. I think it's a big, long journey the ANC must undertake in renewing itself. First, in government, clean. Itself as a party, present new values. We can have that national dialogue which has been talked about. It's fine for me. What do you do after that? After the national dialogue, we must have a program of real renewal, where it's not the ANC which is in the dialogue alone. There's a consensus in the country what needs to be done to renew this our society, to give him a new moral platform.
But Dr. Phosa, you'd agree with me that when you've got the Tripartite Alliance criticizing the mother body, SSCP and COSATU, they in itself is also your biggest challenge, because what was once a strong alliance seems to be drifting apart. I mean, you got the SSCP, I had them a few weeks ago saying, well, if it comes to push and shove, we may even look at contesting the elections. Now, whether they're doing this out of the GNU, which we're going to touch in a bit, the bitterness of the GNU, the fact that they were not consulted in the GNU discussions, that's one part of it. But does the ANC look at the Tripartite Alliance the same it looked at it maybe 20 or 25 years ago when you were at the helm there?
Well, the SSCP likes making those threats very easy and then walking away from those threats. It's not new. I'm not worried about that. Expressing anger, they're entitled to express their views in democracy. The day we close those voices, democracy is dead. Now, it should be a point of worry for the ANC if the allies say, we don't agree with you. We should not dismiss it. This was a discussion last week, because the ANC is concerned about it. And COSATU saying the same thing. As to where it's going to end up, only time will tell. I mean, many of us held very serious reservations about the DA being aligned with the ANC. I'm one of those.
Yes.
Because of fundamental political differences. We differ on Israel and Lebanon and Hamas. We differ on those things. We differ on the ANC going to the International Court of Justice saying, oh, these guys are committing crime, they're killing people. We differ. So where is the point of convergence? We even differ on the education bill. So there are a lot of all these problems which are there. Now, that is a threat to the ANC constituency in the next local government elections. I'm saying it again, I'm repeating. But I've come to settle, I'm a realist, that there's a GNU. That's the government of the day. And let's make it work. I'm a realist. With all my reservations, I'm saying, let our government work. And at the moment, it looks like the honeymoon is continuing. Let's pray that it continues.
That's where the next segment, of course, the final one is going to be the government of national unity. And did the ANC make the right choice with regards to that? We'll continue this or wrap up the conversation. Well, Dr. Phosa mentioned earlier on that the honeymoon period of the government of national unity seems to be going quite well. Dr. Phosa, before we talk about the government of national unity, I want to touch on the other parties that should have been consulted, and you mentioned it in the book. That there was a bit of disappointment that the ANC looked beyond the EFF, given, of course, that they now have been dropped as the fourth biggest party in the country. But given someone who Julius Malema is, given that he's, of course, and you've got, I would like to think you've still got a relationship with him, given that in the youth league, you of course backed him, given the way he was suspended from the party. Was there a mishap from President Ramaphosa's side in not looking to negotiate with him to try and bring him into this GNU?
You know, Malema faced first batch of charges in the ANC. I defended him successfully. Because I believe that if a young man or anyone makes a mistake, we must take corrective measures. And there's no dustbin for any of us.
Yes.
A dustbin does not correct anybody. We need to find a way of correcting one another. And at some point we thought maybe send him to Cuba for political training. I thought we were thinking politically. But then when the thing came second round, he was expelled. Malema had to plead for his membership of the ANC. Let me tell you, I like the boy. He's bright. I respect him. And I think it was a mistake to get him go. He left with 1 million members of the youth for the ANC. And the ANC has never recovered.
And the 2014 election spoke of that.
Yes. He was very powerful. It's reducing now a little bit. And what's your question?
Should he have been involved in this GNU negotiation? Should Ramaphosa have looked at it?
They talked to him, but there was no agreement. If you say should have, I agree with you that he should have. That platform should be as inclusive as possible. But to give the president credit, he put a lot of people on that platform. The Olomisas, the Mackenzies. Give him credit. The Steinhazen. A lot of these guys are very excited to be ministers. They never dreamt it would happen out of those elections. But as long as they perform, they do their duties, I don't have a problem. But whether or not the GNU will hold, only time will tell.
Well, investor confidence seems to be quite high.
It's high, it's
when
okay.
you look at it, I mean,
Yeah.
they've traveled across the world to try and get that. But there was once a question that was raised to Fikile Mbalula in terms of the government of national unity in 94, which was more of the transition period to try and foster goodwill and nation building. Obviously, it's not nation building now. It's trying to get the economy right and, of course, trying to get the social fabric of the country right. How would you view the ANC looking at aligning with partners like the Democratic Alliance? And you mentioned it. There's totally different opposing views, from the Bella Bill to what's currently happening in Palestine to the NHI. And whether, because you've got Helen Ziller, who is barking in the background, as Fikile Mbalula would once say, trying to put it in a way where she's, and I want to use this word quite very carefully, because the quote-unquote undermining of it, because there seems to be a lot of contestation, especially with NHI and the Bella Bill, that's going to threaten the GNU. As an ANC veteran, is that something that you are worried about, that you've got individuals that are coming from the outside trying to threaten just the GNU and maybe its stability that it has had so far for the last 5 months?
My view is, once you are on that GNU platform, you're committed to give and take and carry the nation into the future, not on your narrow political base and platform, but on a more uniting national platform. As a leader, you must think of the nation, not of your party. The time for parties is about to be over. The nation will never go away. We must say what would be the national interest. Even Helen Ziller, she is not stupid, must also be called upon to say what is in the national interest. And we must find consensus on what is in national interest. I think it is important we grow the economy, we fight crime, we increase jobs, we make sure that the roads have no potholes, we make sure that the corrupt go to jail, that crime is reduced and people feel security. These are some of the basics of the national interest. This should unite us, rather than whether I'm DA or NC, which is more divisive in my view. They are where they are. They should be there in the national interest.
Dr. Phosa, in 2 years' time, or maybe 1.5 years' time, of course, local government elections. Where do you see the ANC from now up until then, given who they've aligned themselves with in the GNU? Of course, we got the government of provincial unity here in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. Panyaza Lesufi, of course, holds that premier position. Where does the ANC see itself in the next 1.5 years, given that local government elections in 2016 was that first port of a wake-up call for them? And you've stressed and you've harped on it, that this is where they need to, quote-unquote, as you say, pass up.
They must pass up. I said it, that it's going to be compromising. But right now, the EFF and MK are exploiting that and say, you see, they're traitors. They're going to bed with the enemy. People are gullible. They seem to believe that. I foresee that the MK will sweep the boards on local government in KZN more than at any other time. But if you look at the international polls right now, I'm coming back again to the polls, they're predicting that the ANC, if it does not correct itself, will get between, and I'm going to shock you, 26 and 29%.
That's low.
That's what has been predicted now. And the ANC is looking that in the face. If we were going to a denial and say, can't be true, it would be the same as when we said in 2024 elections, we can't get less than 40. And we got 40.
Dr. Phosa, I want to touch on, obviously, President Zuma, because, I mean, you've mentioned him, the relationship is there from Mozambique. His MK party, when you looked at the percentages that they won in this year's elections, did it come as a surprise to you, given that this party was, a few months old?
Well, it's a surprise to everybody. Everyone who doesn't say so.
But Mathews Phosa, who was with Ubaba in those times, did it shock you that he would defect from the ANC and form this party, which would cause such a massive impact? The fact that they've taken two important members of the EFF, Floyd Shivambu and Advocate Dalimpofu.
Advocate Mukwebane.
Yeah, and Mukwebane also, yes.
Let me tell you about Zuma. He's a very nice uncle. He's a charmer. You can ask any journalist who has been there even now. They come back with impression. He's a very kind man. That's how he projects himself. But he's very good at projecting himself as a victim, very effective. He resigns from, he formed MK, he votes for them, but he said to the ANC, I'm still a member. I mean, seriously? He didn't think the ANC would laugh at that and smile and go to the bank. So he plays political games very well. That he's got so much votes. No one must lie to me. We didn't expect that. But it's a reality. And it's the second biggest in parliament. It's a reality. We have to deal with that reality. And where it is all going depends on, in my view, and I'm sorry, how long he's going to be there alive. I'm sorry. But Zuma is the party. I don't care who says what. He is the party. And then one woman who went there to try and join says, I came back. So why did you come back? She says, it's a male party.
Yeah, sure.
He made such a statement, so I'm not going to go there. But you can't take it away from them. They're there in modern reality. They have won power. They will continue to win power as long as Zuma is alive. They will win power. Yes.
Dr. Phosa, the top 7 of the ANC, okay, one may argue that, no one really knows where Paul Mashatile is in all of this, but it's more aligned towards President Cyril Ramaphosa. How does President Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, when he came in 2018, seen as this crusader of anti-corruption, it's been a challenge for him right now. We've got 1.5 years until local government elections, and then, of course, one has to look to 2029. How does he, as the president of the party, find a way to renew this African National Congress?
He has to go on the values which we have espoused of clean, good governance at all levels, national, provincial, and local government. He must be seen to be fighting corruption at all those levels and arresting and prosecuting the guilty. We need to see them being paraded.
But the NPA needs to be strengthened. Hawks needs to be strengthened.
SIU needs to be strengthened.
Yes.
Yeah, it must all be done. I pity him. He means to do them, but it's not going to be easy for them. It's all about his comrades, who he must punish and get rid of and clean up. But then talk about renewal entails action, positive action. Stop corruption, stop the crime, make people feel secured, grow the economy, keep the level of confidence in the economy where it should be.
Yes.
At the moment, it looks like it is like that, but it's just one element. People are still being killed in this country. Women are still being raped in this country. It's not acceptable.
Sure.
We need to fight crime,
Dr. Phosa, to wrap up this conversation, I want to talk about the late Colonel Muammar Gaddafi. I mean, we spoke of you have great admiration for him. You've called him your uncle. I want to talk about the camel's milk because when I read that part, I was like, wow, it caught my imagination. What was Muammar Gaddafi? What was he like? Because, of course, you visited him. You've had discussions with him, of course. He was a big supporter of the South African struggle. What was he like? And just that story of the camel's milk.
Well, we decided with Zuma to visit him. And there was Ambassador Al-Zubaydah here in South Africa. He said, Matthew, whatever you do, when he's going to give you camel's milk in the first meeting, don't drink it. So why? I would like to taste camel's milk. He said, it's going to run your stomach. I said, okay, I won't drink it. So when we arrived there, we met him in a tent with Bashir, one of his advisors, and President Zuma was there. Zuma introduced me as a treasurer, a guy who was looking for money for the funding of the party, everything. And Gaddafi must work with Bashir, and then we agreed like that. But he offered me a mug of camel milk. I knew what it was, and I knew what to say no to. I said, sorry, Colonel Leader, I cannot drink that. He smiled at me, and he didn't protest. But he created a relationship between me and himself, which I treasured throughout these last years in life. He became like an uncle. He would call me here and said, Matthew, fly to Tripoli the following day. I need to consult on something affecting Africa. And I'll take a private jet and fly there. He'll pay for it. And he'll send me with messages for my president and other presidents. He did that repeatedly, And he shared with me his economic vision of Africa, how we could make our roads, our railway lines, our airports talk to one another, not in the colonial way. How could build Inga Dam in Kinshasa and supply water to the whole of SADC, not only water, but hydropower as well. He had a vision about Africa, which no one can dispute. And he had the money, by the way, to fund this project, this vision. He was not a dreamer. And we talked so many times. And there was this thing about the African Union, yes. And we need one president. Most of the presidents in Africa were very nervous about him. I said to him, that's when on a trip when I was alone with him. I said, comrade leader, they won't let you be the president. But I talk freely to him. Mandela taught me to talk freely to leaders. He says, why? I would make a good president for Africa. You know, brother, you know what he said? I said, do you want to know the truth? He said, yes. I said, they don't trust you as the president of Africa. He did something like this. I don't know what it meant, but I told him. Then we were laughing. And he really treated me like a son. And I want to talk about something. When the fighting took place in Libya, I want to talk about this for the public to know. I was the one who was shuttling between UAE, therefore Arab League, and Zuma, and Gaddafi, trying to find a peaceful solution. We believe that the tribes could form a government of national unity, and that Gaddafi didn't necessarily have to remain, but it could be a government of national unity. We are fighting for that. And Zuma involved some of the African countries, presidents. We arranged that they go and stick Gaddafi. Mahmoud Jabril, the prime minister of the fighting forces of Libya in exile, came to see me. I introduced him to Zuma. And they pleaded with him to ask for peace.
Dr. Phosa, I've got 1 minute. I just want you to wrap that story up in 1 minute, please.
We tried to foster peace in Libya. We failed until General Gaddafi was killed in the most brutal manner, which still makes me hurt to do it.
Dr. Phosa, unfortunately, time is up. I wish we had more time. It was a thoughtful, political, knowledgeable conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the
Assalamu
opportunity.
alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for the opportunity.
No, it's an absolute pleasure.
Yes.
Dr. Mathews Phosa.
Shukran.
Shukran. Afwan. That's Dr. Mathews Phosa, of course, ANC Treasurer General, beg your pardon, and a former ANC Treasurer General and a veteran of the party. That's all we have for you here on Talking Point from myself, Fahraaz Patel, and the rest of the team in Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.